Andrew Dominic stumbled upon a densely written book by Ron Hansen while in a secondhand thrift store in Australia, not knowing that the words upon those pages would land him a directing gig with Warner Brothers and Brad Pitt as his leading actor. Dominic was adamant about this production not being like any other Western film produced before. He did not see this story portraying Jesse as an action-packed Western adventure like had been done before. In contrary, Dominic wanted a more Victorian story for a Dixian Western. Dominic is quoted as saying, "When we went to Western Canada where we shot the film, they had this big prop house, which was kind of Western prop house. And when we walked in, half the place was lined with these barrels, and I was like, oh no." Dominic was drawn to the way Hansen wrote the book, everything down to the language used. It was something that was very important that the movie captured that feeling of destiny and density and predestination, he said in a quote. Dominic's belief that a movie can grasp a viewer emotionally more so with the sound brought throughout the motion picture than the visual effects can shaped every aspect of Dominic's direction with the production of The Assassination of Jesse James. By Coward. Every detail within this movie intentionally plays out the way that Dominic pictured within his mind. Lighting, camera focus, music, casting, it all was so well thought out so that Dominic could create a movie like had never been done before. He did not wish for this film to show the legend of Jesse James. No, he wished for it to show the assassination of a criminal. This brought a darkness to the scenes, the lighting, and scene transitions. Just as Andrew Dominic deliberately chose the way the storyline would be written, he was very deliberate about the way the film would look on the big screen. The lighting in the film is very monochrome. The scenes are very dark with some natural light scenes that brighten it occasionally. The scene transitions bring upon a sort of overlap of one scene over the other. There's also a blur around the outline of the screen. This seems to help bring the viewer into a place of seeing Jesse's mind. The cloudiness within his mind seems to be undoubtable when these scenes play out. It almost has the viewer wondering what could be going through his head, and yet still has the viewer realizing they can never comprehend the chaos within Jesse's mind. The focus of the camera is very essential as well. There are many scenes where the camera is focused in on one object, while the viewer is taken in by every sound and movement within the scene. This gain brings the viewer into the scene and feeling every emotion, something Dominic was very concerned about being able to happen. The music was even well played out. Dominic wanted the movie to center around the assassination that the film was leading up to, and the music reflected that. The transition of scenes had ominous and malice music that set this dreary mood throughout it. It seems the one detail Dominic not only cared about but put plenty of thought into was that he would cast the lead and supporting lead.
The character analysis Jesse James. In the movie The Assassin of Jesse James by Robert Ford, actor Brad Pitt portrayed Jesse James. The director chose Pitt to play James because of his on-screen mystery. James's character was based on the infamous bank robber that was also part of the infamous James Young gang. In the film, Jesse was portrayed as a psychopathic, reckless, depressed, heartless, murdering robber. The director wanted to villainize James in contrast to most movies that describe him as a legend. In film, directors often try to connect viewers to the characters. As stated in the textbook, identifying with the characters is a common reason people love a certain movie. However, the director in this film wanted to illustrate the true nature of James. In the movie, James even becomes somewhat suicidal as he speaks about suicide in the film to Charles. He looks at himself in the ice and shoots his reflection. He was also paranoid and wanted control over the four brothers, even as far as telling them they cannot be alone without his permission and sleeping in a room with Robert. There is a belief that he subconsciously wanted Robert Ford to kill him. He brought Robert a gun as an apology for his paranoia right before the assassination. James also disarmed himself directly before he was shot, which also indicates those theories. The film illustrates his perplexed thoughts through cinematography, with blurred lenses as James stares into the distance, capturing his blurred mind. Dialogue of the film elaborates on his mental state as well, in how he had to be in control. James stated in the film that no one tells him what to do. The film does not give background history on James or why he becomes such a monster, unlike most films based on James. Some believe James as a legend hero, calling him a Robin Hood. Those films and many novels discuss James' time in the military and how and why he became a robber. Those events would have contributed to the audience connecting with him and providing reasoning for his mental issues he displayed. However, the film shows a robber in which he shows no emotion, only laughing as he commits his crimes. During the scenes, babies were heard crying in the background, and ominous music plays after James's disturbing act. The director used it to illustrate the maliceness of James. The scenes of James naming snakes after his enemies and killing them with his bare hands, as he speaks about how good they taste, indicates his vengeance traits. In the movie, Jesse James is shown as a coward combined with his psychopathic ways when he shoots his friend Ed in the back and proceeds to shoot Ed's horse. Also, he attacks one of Ford's young cousins. He seems uncontrollable, beating and even trying to rip the boy's ear off to get information. In addition to this, the film shows he was not much of a father in scenes with his children. He is not affectionate, which was used to show how emotional he was. In addition to these traits, James is portrayed as reckless in the beginning when he allowed Robert Ford into the gang against his brother's dislike for Robert. He stated he didn't care who joins him, in complete contrast to the end where he was more paranoid. In the end of the movie, James' body was filmed and put on ice for the public to view as a criminal in the success of the government to provide their victory on crime. However, the public sincerely mourned James. It was believed that the director used these scenes to show the mentality of society in the era that idolized a villain. After researching Jesse James' assassination and viewing the movie, I think the director was mostly historically correct in the portrayal of James. Robert Ford. Robert Ford was the youngest of his brothers, similarly to James. He was also part of James's gang and would ultimately be the one who assassinated James. Casey Affleck's soft, smooth voice landed him the role of Robert Ford. In contrast to James, Robert's character was not villainized. However, Ford was also portrayed as having multiple mental issues. He obsessed over James to the point that he was once caught studying James in the tub. James told Ford in that scene he didn't know if he wanted to be like him or if he wanted to be him. The director did go into Ford's history somewhat, with scenes of others making fun of his obsession with James from a young age. Ford is seen putting a mask he wore during the James Younger gang train robbery in a box under his bed filled with memorabilia of the James brothers. His background helped make him a three-dimensional character that the audience could connect to. His on-screen description of James seemed as if he was in love with James. During his initial meeting with the James brothers, the older brother, Frank, said that "You give me the willies," because Ford seemed somewhat of a creepy stalker when he approached Frank. Ford's character,
I could finish.
Yeah.
Ford's character, shaky and nervous demeanor, was well portrayed by the Affleck on screen. Ford was not good at hiding his emotions, and James picked up on that a few times, which contributed to his paranoia. Ford seemed to change his feelings toward James after a shootout that led Ford to commit the murder of James's cousin. This made Ford seem edgy or even more manly. This coincided with James's attack on Ford's young cousin. He may have felt betrayed by his idol or began to fear James. Ford seems very intense during James's visit. Many argue over the accuracy of the events of the film during this period. The events leading up to the assassination lead the audience to believe that Ford killed James out of fear. It also played on an obsession theory using scenes of Ford lying in James's bed before the moments right before it happened. The narrator was describing details of how Ford could smell the lilac in Jesse's pillowcases. However, the film's highlights of Ford's life after the assassination illustrates the opposite. His character development after James's death was fast spiraling, but used scenes to show the real character of Ford. Ford goes on to reenact the assassination scene 800 times live. His treatment of his brother Charles indicates that he wanted all the fame of killing James and the reward money. The narration stated that Charles thought that during the reenactments that Robert could kill him, indicating psychopathic ways similar to James. During performances, the audience would call him a coward about him shooting James from behind. Although his character was not portrayed as a coward during the film, the events from history wrote him as one. So ironically, the title named Ford as the coward but represents James as one. As the film comes to an end, the narrator describes Ford's life and integrates that he did it for fame. Even after his brother commits suicide, he goes to the homes of James' victims' family. After his rejection and being labeled a coward, he regrets the assassination. He was seen drunk and reckless, shooting a gun in a bar when he heard songs naming him a coward, illustrating reckless behavior. He seems to become very solitary and insanely gross. His obsession was felt as the film came to an end when it was said that no one missed James more than Ford, and the film ends with Ford's assassination, in which he is seen almost ready to go.